Yeah. So, all right. How you guys doing? It's been a long hiatus. I think almost a year since November. That the last time I had a video on my channel, Lions Den. Welcome back, everybody. I'm joined by my Coptic brothers, Ican and Dioscorus. Very fitting of the name, Dioscorus, for the feast of the Holy Saint Pope Dioscorus of Alexandria 2 days ago. May his prayers be with us. Um, and this video that we're doing right now live is a reaction video. It wasn't planned. It's spontaneous. That's why it's happening. If it was planned, it probably wouldn't have happened because we planned a million things. We haven't done any of them. So Michael Lofton on Reason and Theology, if it's still called that, I don't know if it's called the Michael Lofton Show, whatever it's called now. He did a video talking about Pope St Dioscorus, and it's a huge oversimplification, to say the least, about the story between him and Pope Leo of Rome. And he went over very kind of generally and dismissively what happened between 448 and 451. And we're going to do a reaction to his video here. And please like, subscribe, leave in the comments whatever you guys think. Let's go for it. Brothers, Ican, Dioscorus, you guys have anything to add before we get started?
Nope, that's all.
Also, like the bell, yani, for the YouTube algorithm.
What?
The bell, the bell, ring the bell.
Ring the bell, yeah, subscribe, whatever, all that stuff. Okay.
All right, let me
Good.
present.
Yeah.
Share screen.
Oriental Orthodox.
Did it work?
I think so. Let's see.
All right, can you see it?
Yeah, it worked.
Okay.
Who was the first patriarch, or bishop even for that matter, who attempted to judge the first see? That is the Holy See, the Bishop of Rome, the Pope. Do you know? Well, it was actually Dioscorus of Alexandria, who was Patriarch of Alexandria, who attempted to excommunicate Pope Leo the Great. And I want to briefly talk about this because I think there are some applications for our time and some lessons that we could learn from this. Well, there is a whole lot in the background to the controversy that takes place around this time at the Council of Chalcedon 451 and also at the Robber Synod in 449 in Ephesus, sometimes called the Ephesus II or Second Council of Ephesus. Again, Leo calls it a robber synod. He doesn't see it as authentic. There's a lot of controversy, a lot of background. I'll try to briefly summarize this and show you how this then led to Dioscorus attempting to excommunicate the Pope and what the fallout was from that action. So Dioscorus, again, is the Patriarch of Alexandria. He is dealing with, just as everybody else is dealing with, all kinds of Christological views that are competing views out there. We had just previously had the First Council of Ephesus in 431 that was dealing with some Christological issues, and some other things were unresolved, and there were people who were reacting.
Oh, by the way, just let me know whenever you guys want me to pause.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna tell you, I can. Just feel free to pause whenever you want to say something. So this is a good spot. He said a few things already. So he calls Ephesus to the robber synod. He's going to get into more detail. If you want, you can double the speed on him because he talks slow. I talk slow too. It's not a diss. It's up to you if you want, if you can catch the points fast enough.
All right.
So we'll talk more in detail about Ephesus 2 being a robber synod or not. But please keep in mind, viewers, what are the ingredients of an ecumenical council? What does it take for something to be called an ecumenical council to start with? Okay, so historically, emperors have called for ecumenical councils, and all of the sees, including Rome, is recognizing the legitimacy of that gathering as it's about to happen. Okay, all of those components are there for Ephesus 2. All the sees know about it. All the sees are attending. Everyone knows what's going to happen. The emperor called for the council, Emperor Saint Theodosius, who is canonized, not just by us, even by the Chalcedonians. He's canonized. He's the same emperor who called Ephesus 1 in 431, is the same emperor. Rome sent legates to Ephesus 2, therefore recognizing the legitimacy of the gathering of that council. Everyone knew that Dioscorus was presiding there. It wasn't some like middle of the night, they arrested Jesus and took him when nobody's paying attention to the few people in the Sanhedrin that was going to. It wasn't that kind of meeting. It was an imperial, everybody knows about this, it's official kind of meeting. Eutyches had appealed to Dioscorus, to Leo, to the emperor to get his case appealed. Flavian was being judged. This was the point of the council, and everyone knew that. Leo's tome, we're about to get to it later, just so this is preliminary stuff for you guys to think about. Leo's tome was a judgment before the appeal, based off of what Flavian already had told Leo. It wasn't about Leo wrote the tome in 449 before this council took place. So Leo's writing this not as a judgment of what Eutyches is going to say, but of what he had already ruled. So imagine, Chalcedonians, 431, Pope Celestine writing his ultimatum to Nestorius, the Council of Ephesus happening, Nestorius theoretically being present, and Celestine already judging him regardless of whether or not he's going to confess orthodoxy or not. Well, it matters to know what the judgment is going to be, what the guy is going to confess at the council. The tome becomes obsolete if the guy is confessing orthodoxy. We'll talk about the orthodoxy of the tome or lack thereof soon, but go ahead. I can't.
Before this, it's important to note that St. Dioscorus, although he presided in the first place, in the chief place, he wasn't the only presider, and as we'll probably end up talking about, he wasn't the only one making decisions. And actually, the whole synod was unanimous in making decisions in various places and instances. And it was really Emperor St. Theodosius II who ultimately pulled the strings as to what was going to happen with the bishop's consent at the synod. And that's important because it actually destroys the whole Chalcedonian narrative if indeed they still want to consider Emperor St. Theodosius II a saint.
A great point, Dioscorus. I can. You got anything? You want to keep going?
All right, we'll keep going.
Okay.
Being against the decisions that were made, and they kind of go to the other extreme. And then you have a figure known as Eutyches, who was the archimandrite in Constantinople, or he was an archimandrite in Constantinople. And what he decides to do is put forward a view that Jesus has only one nature, as opposed to the Catholic faith that says Jesus is one person, two natures, human and divine. Well, he says there's only one nature. Eutychianism, or what's also called monophysitism. Well, his bishop, Flavian of Constantinople, or his patriarch, I should say.
All right, so I want to pause here because I don't know if he's going to go more in depth into this later, but so far I already see an issue. He's describing monophysitism as merely anyone who confesses one nature as opposed to what they call one person in two natures. And so there's an issue here because the doctrine of one nature is what Saint Cyril taught, it's what Saint Athanasius taught, it's what multiple fathers taught, and it's also the faith of the Third Ecumenical Council, the Council of Ephesus in 431 AD. We see, for example, that in this council, Saint Theodotus of Ancyra, he was permitted to give a homily in the council, a sermon, and in it he says that there are not two natures or two things. A very explicit condemnation of diophysitism. And so I don't see how he can characterize the doctrine of one nature as simply Eutychianism. I think there at least needs to be a further explanation and a further nuance to distinguish what's called Eutychianism and what is the Orthodox doctrine of Miaphysitism taught by Saint Cyril, the Third Ecumenical Council, I would say Saint Gregory the Theologian, and many other fathers, including even Saint Ephraim the Syrian, very well known, especially in the Syriac Church.
Yeah, Dioscorus, you have anything before I say something about this?
So these homilies, and there's multiple of them by Saint Theodotus of Ancyra. There's at least 3 of them, all of which are preserved in Greek. And there's debatably a 4th one only preserved in Ethiopian. But that one you can shove aside because it doesn't include anything meaningful that the other 3 don't already include content-wise. The first homily has multiple anti-Diophysite statements. What we just heard from ICANN was one excerpt from one of them, which in context is actually even more anti-Diophysite than it sounds. And so within the first homily, we said this. Within the second homily, we see that he explicitly says that the Jews did not crucify the human nature only, and then he explains, but the united nature. And then he gives an analogy of the word of the emperor, the anhypostatic word of the emperor, basically, and then the papyrus, which is united to it by the form of writing, by the mode of writing. And he says, like, if you tear it up, have you torn only the visible nature of the papyrus or the imperial word also? It's the imperial word also, because it's the one from the 2. He says that the union of 2 does this. It basically brings the properties of one to the other so as to be a single one, and by itself no longer remains 2, is no longer named 2. And if you say 2 again, then you're undoing the union, you're canceling it. And so this is very important for us to realize in light of this statement of, oh, well, Eutychius taught monophysitism. Well, maybe you're not wrong according to what the scholarly definition of monophysitism is, but then such a person would have to also admit that the Council of Ephesus dogmatized monophysitism and condemned a non-monophysite position as the fundamental error of the Nestorians in these homilies, which are part of the Council of Ephesus. When someone says the Acts of the Council of Ephesus, they are also including homilies.
Okay. So Michael is just assuming, he said the Catholic faith, one person, 2 natures. He's just assuming that one person, 2 natures. Who says that? Which of the fathers ever tells us that Christ is in 2 natures? We don't have this in the patristic body. The fathers, whether it's the Cappadocians, the Alexandrians, the Syriacs, who's saying 2 natures? There's 2 natures in Christ. Where do we get this from? Cyril, Ephesus already dealt with this. There's one incarnate nature from 2. So he is assuming something lazily, is disappointing because he's so concerned with nuances. He talks about nuances all the time. Where is he getting this from? Eric Ibarra, honestly, he admits, he says, it's hard to find someone having this formula, one person and 2 natures, before Leo does it. He said it's hard to find it. So I'm not sure why these people, when I say these people, I mean Westerners who come to Apostolic Christianity, so-called, or Chalcedonianism, assume that it's just because it's the easier option. It's lazy research, YouTube research, as I call it. And then they just land into some version of Chalcedonianism instead of actually being honest and looking into the situation to see the patristic faith is that there's one incarnate nature of the word. Let's do it.
All right.
Held a synod in 448, judging him and deposing him for this view. Obviously, Eutyches did not like that he was removed from office. And here, Dioscorus of Alexandria comes to his rescue. Alexandria had been competing with Constantinople, and Constantinople competing with Alexandria for a while. So here they square off, if you will, because the Patriarch of Alexandria is now attempting to undo a decision of Constantinople and the Patriarchate there.
Can you pause it? Okay. So this is not at all what happens. There is the rivalry, sure, no problem, Constantinople, Alexandria, but that's not why Dioscorus got involved with Eutyches. He got involved because the emperor asked him to. So Eutyches was a close friend of the emperor, and the emperor was disappointed that Eutyches got excommunicated by the synod, and he wanted Dioscorus to overturn the ruling. So he asked for the ecumenical council. Going to Alexandria, why? Because it has primacy in the East. Since same emperor is used to what happened with Cyril's council. He went to the same city and he went to Cyril's successor, handpicked successor Dioscorus, to judge the case. What is he talking about? This rivalry, and Dioscorus is trying to get involved, as if Dioscorus, we say in Arabic, يحشر حاله. That's not what he did. The emperor asked for this, and Leo and Rome recognized the council and sent legates to it.
It's also important to realize for us that what we will end up seeing with this home synod of Constantinople is that this wasn't initiated by Flavian. Yes, this was initiated by Flavian and not by St. Dioscorus. And also, we'll find out that actually the robber synod, if you will, in terms of bad things happening, will have been found to have been the home synod of Constantinople. Not just because of what we believe is Nestorianism, such as forcing Eutyches to anathematize Saints Cyril and Athanasius, but also tampering with the minutes by the compatriots of Flavian and perhaps Flavian himself. And we'll see that Flavian doesn't put up a good defense for himself when he's caught in the Second Council of Ephesus.
Yeah, I think Rome needs to remember, and Constantinople does too, where Alexandria stood historically in terms of the theological battles. Saint Alexander and Athanasius and Timothy and Cyril and Dioscorus, like they're always championing orthodoxy every time they're on the front lines fighting for orthodoxy. What's Rome doing? Where is Rome in that? Where's Constantinople? Did Constantinople even exist until like the 4th century? So, yeah, go for it, bro.
All right.
So he holds a synod in 449 in Ephesus, again called the Second Council of Ephesus, or more appropriately called the Robber Synod by Pope Leo the Great, since we don't accept it as an authentic synod. All kinds of shenanigans took place here at the synod. And what happened was Eutyches was restored.
Okay, so I asked him this in the comments, but since I was the first of Lofton's excommunications, Pope Lofton, him and his island, him and Pope Francis together. So I was the first on his excommunication island before the rest of the crew joined. So he doesn't reply to my comments on his videos. But when I commented, I said, "What shenanigans happened at Ephesus too?" Where are you getting the idea? Later on in the video, we're going to see he's going to make fun of the bishops who switch sides and say they were threatened or whatever. Okay, so if you're not believing them, so then what shenanigans happened at Ephesus too? If it's a legal council, like we already established, what shenanigans are you talking about? He doesn't go into detail on that. Go ahead.
By Patriarch, the Patriarch of Alexandria, Dioscorus, he was restored, and Flavian of Constantinople, the Patriarch, was condemned by Alexandria. Obviously, there were some major issues here. And in fact, after he was condemned, that is Flavian, they assaulted Flavian, beat him severely, and 3 days after the beating, he died from his wounds. And so he is considered a martyr in the Catholic Church because he died for the faith and was unjustly persecuted.
All right.
Well,
we all got something to say about this.
Yeah.
Lofton should know better, because Chadwick and every scholar who's to be taken seriously about this knows that nothing happened to Flavian at the council. And I don't know where Lofton's getting his information the 3 days after the council thing. He appealed. It wasn't until months later. The soldiers were already in exile. They did it. Nestorius, who was Dioscorus' enemy, is even saying that Dioscorus did not kill, or the Council of Ephesus did not kill Flavian. And then even the Chalcedonians are confused about it at Chalcedon. They're like, first they say Dioscorus, then they say he had the soldiers do it. Then when Saint Barsomo comes in, they said he did it, and him and his monks. They don't know what they're talking about. You guys got anything?
Yeah, I had something about the accusations. I'm trying to find it.
Dioscorus, go ahead, and then I can.
Okay. So from Chadwick's analysis, which is very good and incredibly detailed, he places the death of Flavian, I think convincingly, within February of 450. And that's months after the closing of the council. Now, the cause of death seems to have been, as I believe it's Nestorius Bazaar of Heraclides and explains, it's the imperial soldiers who had killed Flavian. Now, what would have been the impetus for this? Because when Nestorius himself was exiled because of what happened with his deposition, the imperial soldiers didn't kill him. Well, I think Chadwick makes an interesting case that Pulcheria and Marcian are not Marcian, but Pulcheria and Anatolius of Constantinople are basically the ones who had all of the gain to make in Flavian's death. Because, who was it? It was Leo who told them that as Flavian is alive, as long as he is alive, I will not accept Anatolius or any other successor as Patriarch of Constantinople. Well, that puts you between a rock and a hard place if you are Pulcheria and Anatolius, because the only way to finally have your guy recognized by Rome and have this whole Chalcedon thing go forward is if Flavian met an unfortunate fate. And so that analysis by Chadwick gives a lot of rationale as to why we see what we see in the historical record, and why there's this big confusion as to how the heck this guy died, and also why on earth the great Synaxarion of Constantinople would have his commemoration be in February when there's what the heck is February about? Well, if he died or his remains were found in February, having shortly died before, then that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right. And I just want to add that 3 days after the council, I don't think it's very possible. First off, we actually have a letter of Leo to Flavian still in in 449 AD, like a year after the whole, a year after the whole event. And even if that's not the case, I mean, we still have many sources against this idea that he died due to some beatings that happened in the council. I mean, we still even have his letter to Pope Leo where he appealed against the council, which he wrote while in exile. So I mean, if you're someone who's so severely beaten after a council and you're exiled to the point that you die 3 days later, how do you have the power to write the whole letter and never mention once in this letter that you got beat by anyone? And it's not like he can't write about it. I mean, he's criticizing the council, so if he's being suppressed or if he's being silenced, then why is he speaking against the council and yet not speaking against the so-called beatings? And another thing that I want to bring up concerning the I guess testimonies they bring up from the Chalcedon. Chalcedon had about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 people, 9 groups of people actually, that they accused of murdering Flavian. I'm just gonna list it out real quick. They first off accused Saint Dioscorus himself, session 1, line 30, and many other lines. Then they accused his soldiers. I don't know what soldiers this is. I mean, he's a patriarch, not a military general. Again, session 1, line 54. Then they accused his personal clerics, or who are called Senkeli, who were basically just normal, average advisors and assistants. Again, session 3, line 54. And then they accused the bishops of Egypt, Illyricum, and Palestine in session 1, line 32 and 38. Then they accused Saint Bartholomew the monk, session 4, line 77 and line 81. Then they accused his monks, session 1, line 851. Then they accused the Parabolani, which, if anyone knows who the Parabolani are, they're a Christian group in Alexandria who were basically did a voluntary service. They helped the sick, they took care of the sick, they helped anyone out. And so they have nothing to do with the council, and yet they're still being accused of murdering Flavian. This is session 1, line 851. And then they also accused the bishops who opposed Dioscorus in Chalcedon. According to their own testimony, they basically say, oh, we did it. I don't even know how that one works. Session 1, line 853. And then they accuse a miscellaneous mob, session 1, line 62 and line 851. And then they even accuse Juvenal of Jerusalem, who's canonized in the Chalcedonian churches in session 1, line 62. If anyone knows anything about a court case, usually when all the witnesses that are brought forth, when all of them have disagreeing testimonies, it's usually a sign that there's something going off here. There's something that's not consistent. And so I think it's very, very obvious that this whole narrative is just a later invention just to basically make St. Dioscorus look bad and make St. Bartholomew look bad. Who, by the way, St. Bartholomew was called by St. Simeon the Stylite, the holiest man of the time. And this is not just recorded in Oriental Orthodox sources, it's recorded in the life of St. Bartholomew, the life of St. Simeon, the Syriac life that is, and even in Maronite liturgical manuscripts, if I remember correctly. So very independent sources all mention this event. And St. Simeon the Stylite is now canonized in all of the Chalcedonian churches. So I just wanted to put that out there.
And wasn't it Evagrius who first posited not just the idea that Flavian died 3 days later, but also the idea that St. Simeon the Stylite was actually a Chalcedonian?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and so this puts the invention of the Flavian thing, and also, ironically, of St. Simeon the Stylite being a Chalcedonian, something like 100 years after the fact, even though we have a lot of evidence of the contrary for St. Simeon, actually in abundance. And then we have a good amount with regards to the Flavian issue. Like, it just shows that they're trying to rewrite history. And this has a lot to do with the formula of Hormisdas requiring a lot of the Byzantines who were Henoticon era Byzantines to give up their saints if their saints were not in communion with the See of Rome. So what do? You kind of just like rewrite what happened with those saints in order to justify it. Well, that means that you end up venerating a lot of anti-Chalcedonian saints, but just pretending that they were Chalcedonians.
Yeah, they're the kings and queens at revisionism. Emphasize queens. So for this thing about monks, Simeon and Barsomo, the Stylites, we'll have a show maybe one day about it because they were super anti-Chalcedonian. We'll talk about it eventually. Michael, he's again, like I said before, he's oversimplifying something that I expect more from him. He should know better. And especially with the Flavian thing, it's just the typical polemical accusation of I don't know. They've been saying that to us, and like no scholarship agrees with them. How's the guy gonna write an appeal to Leo if he's dead? Or if he's beaten? At least that slave didn't even die from his injuries yet. Isn't he gonna say, hey, by the way, they beat the hell out of me here?
And we see actually, and to your point, Subdeacon, we see that in that letter of Flavian to Leo, he repeats the same lie that he told in the Second Council of Ephesus, that they didn't allow him to speak. In the Second Council of Ephesus, he made this claim. Basically, they were like, oh, so basically what happened is Flavian required for Eutyches not just to confess two natures after the union, but also to anathematize those who do not say two natures after the union, which contextually was Saints Cyril and Athanasius in particular. And they just had doctored that out of the minutes of the home synod after the fact. And so that's like double the trouble. Well, when they wanted some sort of a defense or whatever by Flavian, so Flavian, hey, what do you have to say about this now that we've uncovered all of this? Like, are these people all just lying or something like that? We see St. Dioscorus does a fantastic job in the Council of Chalcedon defending himself when he's present. He's absolutely tremendous doing that. Well, Flavian's response is, I am not being permitted to speak. That's an interesting statement, that you're not allowed to make a statement. But nevertheless, he's told, no, you're not permitted to speak. Go ahead and speak. I'm not permitted to speak. And then various, one by one, people in the council, not just St. Dioscorus, but the various people presiding it, and also even the whole synod eventually says, you're not being permitted to speak. Go ahead and make your defense, okay? And then Flavian's defense is basically, nothing wrong happened. Fantastic defense, Flavian. Fantastic. So we see that the authorship of this letter to Flavian makes a lot of sense contextually. A lot of sense. But even though he does this lie again that he was caught in and refuted regarding, he repeats this lie in the letter to Leo. But he doesn't repeat any other lie about being beaten or whatever. And he would have every opportunity to, because he already included this one lie.
Ken, you got anything?
Nope, you guys covered it.
Let's do it.
All right.
Well, obviously, this didn't go over very well with Pope Leo. He saw the shenanigans with the robber synod. He sees that Flavian is martyred and unjustly treated. And so he condemns this thing. He says, this is a robber synod. It is a fake synod. This is not ecumenical, even though the council itself identifies itself as ecumenical. He says, no, this isn't ecumenical. I'm overturning this. This is a robber synod. And as you can imagine, Patriarch Dioscorus of Alexandria did not like that. I mean, he had just been condemned by the Pope. His synod was just overturned by the Pope. So yeah, he wasn't very happy. So what he decided to do in 450, shortly after Leo condemns his synod and writes what's called the Tome of Leo, fortifying and strengthening Christology and kind of setting the record straight and saying, here's what it is. Here's the truth. One person, two natures. And he puts that forward in his tome and settles the issue infallibly, according to Leo himself. So here's actually an instance of papal infallibility. Well, Obviously, again, Dioscorus does not like this. So shortly after the tome was written and after his own condemnation of his own synod, well, as you can imagine, with egos and pride, the Patriarch of Alexandria decided in 450 to rashly judge the Holy See, to rashly judge the Pope, specifically Pope Leo the Great. And he signs a document excommunicating the Pope. So the first time in history where a patriarch attempts to excommunicate a pope. No, Photius was not the first. There was precedent for this in Dioscorus of Alexandria. What was the reaction? What was the fallout? Well, I actually had an Eastern Orthodox come into the comment section not long ago.
I just wanted to pause this to mention that I don't even think that St. Dioscorus was the first to excommunicate the Pope. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's been not only multiple heretics and schismatics who have attempted to do so prior to this, but even people who were considered inside the church. I think Saint Cyprian of Carthage and Saint Firmilian have attempted to, or I think they did excommunicate him. Pope Stephen, that is. I can't say for certain because I haven't read the primary sources in a while, but there's definitely, he wasn't even the first to try to excommunicate the Pope. So this is just an ahistorical fact.
Well, we also know that Saint Cyprian and Firmilian attacked the idea that the Pope of Rome has this fundamental supremacy over the rest of the world. And when did any correction of Saints Cyprian and Firmilian have to do not just with the issue of baptism / rebaptism, but with actually you're supposed to accept that the Pope of Rome has supremacy, and the fact that you denied that made you an intolerable schismatic, or at least one of a schismatic mentality. I don't remember any rejection of Saints Cyprian and Firmilian's positions on these matters having to do with their rejection of papal supremacy.
Yeah, I think it took place in one of the Council of Carthage, where they condemned even the idea that there can be a head of bishops, basically, a bishop of bishops, which is, we know now, this is one of the many titles for the Pope of Rome in modern day. And to add on to that, Dioscorus, you're right about how your point about, I'm losing my train of thought. You made a point, I forgot what it was, but I guess we'll move on.
The point was just regarding the issue of the controversy being not just rebaptism.
Yeah. You mentioned how no one has condemned Saint Cyprian and Saint Firmilian for their position on this. And I'd like to add that the only person from, at least before the schism, who had spoken on the topic was Saint Augustine. And Saint Augustine, while I don't think he fully agreed with Saint Cyprian's views on the sacraments, he never condemned his idea on the papacy. And he even doubled down on it. I think during the Donatist controversy, he basically told them, if you disagree with what the Bishop of Rome decreed against you, then you can go a step further and have an ecumenical council which can decide the matter. So here we see that even an ecumenical council is above the Bishop of Rome.
In other words, something is above the Pope.
Yeah. All right.
He said that, so he has these presuppositions and he's building off of them, but the presuppositions is already wrong. Dioscorus did not excommunicate Leo. Leo excommunicated Dioscorus in 449 at the Synod of Rome. Dioscorus excommunicated him back in 451 in Nicaea before they got to Chalcedon. Michael, the king of nuances, is supposed to be careful with this instead of just saying things willy-nilly. It's important to have distinctions, because if Leo is excommunicating Dioscorus in 449, in 450, 451, already writing to people to remove Dioscorus from the diptychs, Dioscorus, it's already a de facto excommunication. He's telling him, no, you're the one who's excommunicated, not me. What's the issue? Go ahead.
And they said, look, the only reason why Dioscorus was eventually condemned by the Council of Chalcedon is simply because he was summoned to come to one of its sessions, and he didn't come. And when you don't come to an imperial summons to attend an ecumenical council after 3 times, you're excommunicated. And here's another case where an Eastern Orthodox doesn't know their own history and doesn't know their own councils. It's something that I see over and over, and it's also a problem in Catholicism, frankly. But it's also an issue in Eastern Orthodoxy. A lot of Orthodox, they just have a very cursory reading and understanding of their own ecumenical councils, the first 7 ecumenical councils. Most of them have never read the canons, decrees, or sessions, the actual acts. They've never really gone into that kind of detail. They just kind of have an elementary understanding of their councils. And so because of that, they end up missing some really important things, especially if they were to look into the acts of these councils, of their own councils, which is something I want to do today. We're going to briefly take a look at some points in the acts of the Council of Chalcedon, the 4th Ecumenical Council, 451, because here you have Alexandria basically being responsible for the situation with Flavian, overturning the decision of Constantinople unjustly, refused to allow the tome of Leo to even be read at Ephesus 2. That's a problem. And then goes and
I just want to pause to note that they didn't refuse to read that tome. St. Dioscorus even asked for it to be put in the documents, for it to be basically on the list of things to be read. And they keep accusing him of saying, do not read the tome, when this never happened. We have the minutes of Ephesus 449. This event never took place, of him suppressing the tome, as they claim, from being read.
Yeah. So, but again, what's the point of a judgment being read if the judgment was before the trial? The tome was the judgment of Eutyches. What's the point of it anymore? The scholar, his name is Every. He wrote in the journal. He has an article he wrote in the Eastern Christian Church's Review. It's called the Monophysite Question, and he argues for Dioscorus and Ephesus 2 not reading the tome in order to protect Rome from an ecumenical excommunication. That's why. But especially because it was obsolete to read it anyways, since again, it's a judgment of a case of a particular individual before the trial. Like the council is the trial. What's the point of the judgment of Leo now, since he's being tried there at the council? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, very well put. Dioscorus, do you want to add anything?
I just wanted to add that we hear that Mr. Lofton says that the Melkites are very ignorant as to their own ecumenical councils, so-called. And however, at the same time, they could just put that back on him. And we will see that with, Vigilius and the 5th Council. And that's not to say that there are not very well-esteemed Roman Catholic apologists who try to bring some sort of a defense for that. There are some that are very high caliber who do that, who try to at least. But I'm speaking more along the lines of Christology. It's now accepted throughout all of the scholarly literature that Vigilius of Rome's letters to Emperor Justinian and Saint Theodora, the faithful emperors, they anathematize those who do not say that Christ has one operation. Anathematizes. And so we can speak about the hypothetical ecclesiology all we want until the cows come home. We can say, oh, but if some situation in the church were to happen where you just need a pope, you don't have one. Well, guess what? When you do have a pope who's apparently infallible and can anathematize beliefs as like completely wrong, and these are in your ecumenical councils. And then in your next ecumenical council, you say, oh, yeah, about that. If anyone says that there is one operation, then that guy's actually anathema, opposite of what our last ecumenical council says in the letter, the 2 letters of Vigilius. I mean, we also see on just the bare bones Christology side that the 5th council condemns those who worship Christ into nature. Now, the reader might ask, isn't that completely contrary to just basic Diophysite Christology? Well, yes, kind of. You also have to take into perspective that the Second Council of Constantinople was trying to reinvent what it means to be Diophysite, right? And one of the things they realize is, wait a minute, if we worship Christ into natures, then we fall directly under what Saint Cyril condemns in one of his tomes against Nestorius, as well as other saints like Saint Theodotus in his exposition on the Nicene Creed. But they try to essentially say you can be a Diophysite while saying that you cannot worship Christ into natures. The idea is that what you worship is not the natures, but the hypostasis, because the natures in the Second Council of Constantinople's view are mere abstractions and not concrete realities at all. It's a totally different paradigm that they create, but it was also completely undone. And so what they had anathematized, worshiping Christ into natures, was confessed later by people like John of Damascus. And yes, it is an extremely Nestorian thing, because that which you worship is necessarily a subject of predication. When you have 2 subjects of worship, there are 2 subjects of predication, and there are necessarily going to be 2 hypostases after the union in such a case. Sorry for the rant.
No problem. It was a good rant. I liked it. All right. You guys ready to move on?
Yep.
And rashly judges the Holy See. This was obviously a problem. So another ecumenical council is called by the emperor, just 2 years after Ephesus 2, 451, Chalcedon, where they have to try to deal with this issue and all the chaos and all the confusion. And they meet. Dioscorus actually attended the first few sessions. He didn't attend the later sessions. He attended the first few sessions and attempted to explain himself and what went down at Ephesus 2 just 2 years prior. And the wild thing is, the vast majority of the bishops who were at Chalcedon were also at Ephesus 2, the robber synod, and they participated in the robber synod. So the fathers of the Council of Chalcedon, most of them were the same fathers at the robber synod. It's a little awkward for them, right? Because now they're coming after Dioscorus when they were part of the council. Now they try to explain it. They try to justify themselves and say, well, you know, Dioscorus in 449, he just wasn't really allowing for anybody to really speak, and they were threatening us. And, you know, if we didn't sign off on this council, the imperial guards were going to kill us. And it's comical to read the first session of the Acts of Chalcedon where they recount what happened at Ephesus. Because again, the same bishops who were part of Ephesus are now here at Chalcedon. They have to explain themselves, because here they're attempting to judge the patriarch that just 2 years ago they had sided with. And there are shouts all over in the imperial sessions here, you know, where they're just all sides are shouting at each other, and it's just ridiculous. It's the most obnoxious thing. They behaved like kindergartners. It was pretty.
Okay, pause it.
It was
This is Alessas. Supposedly this is inspired by the Holy Spirit. This council, like, this is the robber synod. Chalcedon is the robber synod. Look how the behavior of all the bishops. They're all liars. They switch sides, double face. Like, what do you want? This is the people this is the council you're trusting, that God led this council. It's a joke. Look at the Michael Lofton can't stop laughing. The color of his face is the color of his shirt. It's not from God, this council. It contradicts the third council, obviously. And it's the guys who lost in the third council win in the fourth council, and the guys who win in the third council lose in the fourth council. Is the two teams of everyone has their group of friends or whatever. These guys win, these guys lose. It's the same people 20 years later.
And it is for this reason that Christ, as recorded, I think it's by St. John Rufus, records that Christ, in a document that came from heaven, revealed to basically the various peoples and the bishops of some province of, I think, the same place that Basil of Seleucia was in, that those at Chalcedon anathematized him. Well, if you accept the Council of Ephesus as the first Council of Ephesus, as inspired by the Holy Spirit, and as the gathering of the people of God, then that's necessarily the case that Chalcedon was an anathematization of Christ. And the homilies of St. Theodosius of Nicaea and the third letter of St. Cyril to Nestorius, these bear that out. Perfect.
Yeah, I don't. He's saying like Dioscorus was trying to explain, and then he wasn't present and whatever. Dioscorus stood in the face of all of these people by himself, saying, "You guys signed. Who forced you?" He said, "I didn't force you." And everyone was saying in two natures. Just he was saying, "I will say from two, but not two." So Dioscorus has no worldly or like he has no maslaha. What is maslaha in English? I can help me out. It's he has no
favor, no
benefit.
or,
He has no reason. Yeah, no reason or benefit, worldly benefit for this. It's a joke. Like Saint Dioscorus was him and the bishops who walked out. The Alexandrian bishops who walked out were the Christians there, and then Saint Barsoma and his monks when they got there.
Mm-hmm. And one more thing I want to add, I find it funny that Michael Lofton is kind of being honest about this. Like he's admitting that it was very, very obvious excuses. They weren't being very honest in the council. And for this reason, I kind of want to just read out a little bit from the council. So in the first session, this is line 177. The officials and the Senate are basically like, they say this to Basil of Seleucia and Isauria, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They ask him, if your teaching was so orthodox, then why did you accept to depose Flavian? And then he responds, next line, 178, because I was delivered for judgment to 120 or 30 bishops and forced to submit to their decisions. And so St. Dioscorus calls him out on his dishonesty and his lie, and he cites scripture to show this. And in the next line, line 180, Basil doubles down and he says, if I was put up against secular officials, I would have been honest. But since since it was basically bishops, he basically claims that he couldn't be honest or he couldn't disagree with them, and he says, "Death to a child who defends himself against his father." So that was his defense, basically. But one more sec. We know from earlier that this is contradicting the narrative he gave earlier, because earlier they were saying, "Oh, we signed blank sheets. We didn't mean to depose Flavian. They forced us to depose him by signing blank sheets. Oh, it wasn't happening. It wasn't true." And so now in line 182, the officials are calling him out on this. They say, "But earlier you said that you were forced by violence and compulsion to sign the deposition on a blank sheet. And now
we beg your forgiveness."
Yeah, suddenly everyone is chiming in. The Oriental bishops are saying, "We all sinned. We all beg forgiveness. We all sinned. We all beg forgiveness." And it just keeps going like this for a while, and then they just stop and move on. So here we have him being caught in his own lie. It's so obvious that it's even in the acts, in the minutes of
and people have the audacity to call these people bishops. Come on, what kind of bishop is like that? Is that evil? Come on.
Yeah. It's and just more examples of the council, the robber synod of Chalcedon being a council of liars and thieves, is that Theodoret, supposedly he repented, right? Where is his repentance? If he's saying all my Orthodox, who's his teacher? Theodore of Mopsuestia. All my teachers have been Orthodox. That's his repentance. Just because he anathematized Nestorius, that's repenting. He has the same.
Not to mention that he taught Nestorianism after the council as well.
Right. And
by the way, this is a slightly off topic, but I remember the first source to basically explain that Nestorius was invited to Chalcedon back from exile. It wasn't a Miaphysite source. Like I think Saint Philoxenos, for instance, says that, but there was the first source, or at least one of the first, was a Chalcedonian source. I want to say Gennadius of Constantinople, or maybe Theodoret of Cyrus after the fact of the council, but I'm pretty sure it was one of those two, Theodoret or Gennadius of Constantinople.
Ibas too, the letter of Ibas, like, it's such a blasphemous letter. It's so heretical. It's the view of 433 from the Antiochian side, and yet it's accepted at Chalcedon as an Orthodox letter.
And it's such an extremist letter that it's not something you can pass over by. You can't just pass over it in neutrality. There's nothing like that. You have to either condemn it or accept it, because it cuts to the heart of the entire matter. The entire matter. That's what Ephesus 2 did. Ephesus 2 cut to the heart of the matter, which is 12 anathemas, which is the Diophysite Nestorian Christology as condemned by the Council of Ephesus, versus the Miaphysite Christology of not just St. Cyril, not just some lone St. Cyril, but also of the ancient fathers, and also of the other presiders of the Council of Ephesus, Saints Acacius of Melitene and Theodotus of Ancyra, and also even Latins like Marius Mercator, who translated St. Cyril into Latin.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, also for the Theodoret of Cyrus thing, we know there's no chance here. I mean, 449 AD, we have a letter from him denying the 12 chapters of St. Cyril. He's condemning the 12 chapters. In Chalcedon, once again, he's doubling down on always being Orthodox. He says, I have always been Orthodox. I've always preached Orthodoxy in the churches, and all my teachers were Orthodox. And we even know that after the second council of Ephesus in 449 AD, he wrote a letter to Pope Leo. No, my bad. This was actually after Chalcedon by a little bit, I think. He wrote a letter to Pope Leo, basically telling him, read all my writings. I've always been Orthodox. Read what I've wrote and what I've said in the church from 20 years ago, 30 years ago, etc. I've always been teaching Orthodoxy. That's an amazing statement for someone who's apparently repented, for someone who in those same 20 or 30 years ago was writing against St. Cyril and supposedly refuting him, as we know from his own writings. And even after Chalcedon, it doesn't just stop there. After Chalcedon, he writes a letter to a man named John of Aegina, I don't know.
Nicaea.
Yeah. And so in this letter, he's citing Nestorius. He is defending the Chalcedonian definition of one hypostasis as basically meaning the same thing as the Nestorian view of one prosopon. Not a lot of people know this, but Nestorius did not advocate for two persons explicitly. That's what his Christology led to. But explicitly, his view was that there's one person, one prosopon of the union. And so Theodoret is defending the definition of Chalcedon by saying that when they say one hypostasis, they mean the same thing as Nestorius saying one prosopon. So his view has not changed. He says his view has not changed. His letters show his view has not changed. So there is no so-called repentance that these Chalcedonians keep bringing up and bragging about. It's insane.
Yeah. And what does he cite in that letter? He cites Nestorius saying, I divide the natures, but I unite the worship. The very thing that those who undid the Christology of 553, Second Constantinople, accepted, saying, well, yeah, you know what? I actually do worship Christ in two natures. Well, then, and that these natures are divided according to the logos of nature. indivisibly divided. I don't care what they want to say, because the point is that according to the logos of nature, they are divided while you claim to unite the worship. This Theodoret, Nestorius, they're all the same. Chalcedon, they're all the same. The difference between Chalcedon and these classical Nestorians is only semantical at best. And actually, at worst, it's exactly the same, because there is good evidence to suggest that Theodore of Mopsuestia was the first one to come up with one hypostasis in two natures. And that actually, we see evidence of this where the St. Cyril's defense of the 12 chapters against the bishops of the Orient, the basically classical Theodorian Nestorians, they claim to reject two hypostases after the union. But what do they keep defending? Two natures. So that's, by inference, is them teaching that there's quote unquote one hypostasis, but there is in two natures as well.
Yeah.
It was a sight to behold. Just read through the first session. You'll see what I mean. It's kind of shameful. But at the end of the day, they justify themselves, and they ask, Dioscorus, explain yourself. He tries to explain, here's what it was, here's the situation. I'm not really defending Eutyches. If he's a heretic, fine, let him burn in hell. I'm not trying to defend the heretic, So he tries to explain himself in the first few sessions. But in a later session, he is summoned and he does not attend. And he says, oh, I'm sick. I'm unable to attend, I'm ill. Well, again, there had already been a previous canon stating that if the emperor summons you 3 times, if you're summoned 3 times, at least through the bishops for an imperial council, if you're summoned 3 times to the council and you do not attend, you're deposed. That's it. You're done. You're removed from office. Well, this is exactly what happened with him. He was deposed. And Orthodox who don't really know their own history and have never actually read their own councils will say, see, that's all he was deposed for. But actually, there's more to it. It's a both and, not an either or. He was certainly deposed, that is Dioscorus, for failing to appear to one of the sessions of Chalcedon. But that is not the only reason why sentence was passed on him. This is what Orthodox often miss. And this is where we're going to learn a very valuable lesson. I am going to share the screen, and let's take a look at one of the big reasons why.
Do you guys want to stop here and talk about what he said so far? Or do you want to just let him play a little bit more and then stop there?
We can talk a little bit. Like, I want to say about what he's saying. I don't think he's like, okay, the thrice summons. So what were the reasons? I don't think he listed all 3 of them, did he? Like,
so his big thing in the video, to my understanding, to my recollection, is it's not just the thrice summonings, but also the excommunication of Leo, and so that it's a both.
Right. He's gonna get to it. He's gonna get to it.
Saint John Chrysostom and Synod of Pope.
Yeah. Saint John Chrysostom didn't go to the thrice summons. Saint Athanasius didn't go to the thrice summons. But Saint Dioscorus, he's not going to the thrice summons. What were the reasons? One of them was like the soldiers weren't letting him come. One of them was he was sick.
Like house arrest, basically.
Yeah, house arrest, and I forgot what the other one was. But
and, I mean, let's be honest. If you attended the first session of Chalcedon as some government official or whatever, imperial official, and you were like, yeah, we have to get this guy Dioscorus down. Like, he can't be succeeding. And you attend the first session, you're like, oh shoot, the only way we can do this is if he's not allowed to attend. Let's put him under house arrest.
Yeah,
it's not actually unplausible at all. That's very plausible.
I watched Lofton's whole video. I don't remember him saying even one time that heresy was a reason. Okay, so it looks like Lofton isn't making the accusation of heresy, and I think Chalcedon got lucky that Dioscorus didn't go, because if he went, they would have been forced to make a judgment on his Christology. Either you're with Cyril, Dioscorus, or you're not. and he gave them an out by not going. So then they just deposed him, not for heresy, but for missing the summons. And Anatolius even says that explicitly. He says he's Orthodox. So Leo, the excommunication of Dioscorus, Dioscorus excommunication of Leo, Lofton is going to get into it in detail in a second, and then we'll comment on that when he does.
All right. I just wanted to add that, correct me if I'm wrong, but that deposition happened in session 3, right?
I think so.
Yeah. And so I remember reading from Dr. Price, Richard Price. This was actually one of the least attended sessions, and it was purposely held without anyone's notice, basically. Like, everyone was kind of like taking a break, and they kind of just did this randomly out of nowhere. And,
that's right.
And so it was a complete surprise for everyone. No one really knew, and so it was basically outside of everyone's convenience. And I just want to say that the Council of Chalcedon, the traditional number of attendees given by the Chalcedonians is 636 bishops. Keep in mind, this is exactly double the number of the 318 at Nicaea. There's a reason for that. Obviously, the number was made up, and Dr. Richard Price has counted the actual number. I think it's like less than 300 or so. And so this session, it had like about 80 attendees, maybe less, maybe a little bit higher, and not even all of them signed on to the deposition. So if there was such a high number as the Chalcedonians claim, 636 or whatever number they want to say, then that means they didn't even have a consensus when they deposed him. Not even the entire council agreed on it. It was a very, very small minority.
Not just that, at the end, when the tome comes in and they're reading it, the bishops of Illyria that were under Rome directly started shouting, "Bring back Dioscorus, bring back the fathers." And then they were being sarcastic. They're like, "If you're Nestorian, go to Rome."
Right. And we have a perfectly good explanation as to why they would be Miaphysite, is because Marius Mercator, who was a Latin, translated St. Cyril into Latin, and in his refutation of, Theodore and all of these people, these Nestorians, he's extremely anti-Diophysite in detail. It's not an ambiguous phraseology of just like, oh yeah, into natures is heresy. He's explaining it on the grounds of mereology of wholes and parts, and a whole divided into its parts versus a whole undivided into its parts, and how this relates to what we say about nature and substance and all of that.
Yeah, the part of the joke that Chalcedon is, and the way that it was run, even in the beginning, the judges, because Mina Solomon's comment about the co-judges, and they didn't judge them or single out Dioscorus, absolutely, but it reminded me of who was judging at Chalcedon itself. So in session 1, Dioscorus sees Theodore at walk-in, and he's like, "What is he doing here? The guy's already deposed." And then they answer him, "Leo restored him based on his authority." And Dioscorus says, "According to what canon can Leo do that to overturn an ecumenical council?"
Crickets were heard after that.
And they don't even answer. What's that?
Crickets were heard after that.
One more time, Dioscorus.
There were crickets heard after that.
Exactly. Yeah, they didn't reply. Yeah, they didn't reply. Exactly. So what kind of council?
They didn't reply, though, actually, is because this whole papalism thing, it wasn't fleshed out yet. This was really just starting with Leo and Chalcedon. So it's not like they could point to something showing that Leo can just do this single-handedly. But nevertheless, they're accepting it. And so Chalcedon becomes essentially one of the first, if not the first, moments of precedent for what would later happen with people like Photius or whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I just want to add that there is, even if we throw aside all the reasons that St. Dioscorus that they gave for why he couldn't attend, it's historically not that big of a deal. I mean, as you mentioned, Daniel, St. John Chrysostom, he didn't attend the thrice summons at the Synod of Oak, and yet they still view him as a saint and valid and completely orthodox. and completely still in the church, not excommunicated. And same with Saint Athanasius, I believe. And a big reason for this is that if we read the Apostolic Canon number 75, I'm going to read it out real quick. A heretic is not to be received as a witness against the bishop, neither only one believer. For in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every word shall be established. So in Chalcedon, they had heretics as basically judges. I mean, I'm pretty sure they even had Theodoret of Cyrus judging St. Dioscorus in the third session. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong or misremembering this detail. But so they're bringing people who were condemned as heretics in the prior synod and then putting them as judges against them, which is uncanonical. It's violating Apostolic Canon 75. And this is the same thing that happened to Saint Athanasius, and so
Yeah,
on.
those who are under the Bishop of Rome would say the reason why they're okay with Chrysostom and Athanasius is because the Bishop of Rome had their back, whereas Dioscorus, he didn't. That's more the question. Actually, the Eastern Chalcedonians might have a hard time dealing with that question, but we're going to get to the Roman stuff soon in the presentation.
I just want to add that this is, by the way, a contradiction on their part, because even if the Pope of Rome defended Saint John Chrysostom, he was still viewed as not basically accepted back in the church by Alexandria, for example. Saint Cyril still didn't view him as an invalid excommunication until many years after, even after Pope Theophilus died, reposed.
All right, that's true.
All right.
He was condemned and deposed. All right. Now, this is from the introduction. I'm going to take a look here in just a moment at the actual session. But first, I want to read the introduction by Father Price. I've also had him on the show, by the way, multiple times. Okay.
Congratulations.
So the presidency of the council, actually, no, it's, here it is, right before that, the council. One cannot understand Chalcedon without reference to Ephesus too, and the backlash against it. The tyranny and violence of the robber council cast a long shadow over the bishops and officials who gathered for the new synod. The architects of Chalcedon sought above all to contrast their enterprise with that of Dioscorus, even though they were, same bishops, in which they saw a perfect model of how not to run a council. The Alexandrian bishop, who only 2 years earlier had stood dominant over the Eastern Church, saw his position steadily unraveling as many of his erstwhile supporters took account of changed circumstances, and his numerous enemies now felt free to speak out. Dioscorus did not help matters when en route to the council. Here it is. In a final act of arrogance, the year 450, he anathematized Pope Leo, the last and worst of the misdeeds that would be charged against him at Chalcedon. And it's got a footnote here. Dioscorus' condemnation of Leo was cited prominently in the formal sentence pronounced against him by the papal legates of the Holy See of Rome. He had done this in the presence of some 10 other Egyptian bishops, probably while they were assembled at Nicaea in August or September. Well, let's actually go and take a look at that. What does the council actually say? Whenever he's being deposed, what is the reason? Is it merely because he didn't come to a thrice summons, as some Orthodox would have you believe? Well, if you look here, this is book 2 in Price's volumes on Chalcedon. You here see the papal legates are speaking on behalf of the Pope, the Bishop of Rome. Because the Bishop of Rome did not actually attend any of these councils by tradition. The tradition was, since the first ecumenical council, the Pope was unable to attend and therefore sent papal legates or representatives. That tradition kind of remained for the rest of the ecumenical councils, at least among the first 7. Okay, so they say, we intended, however, to be lenient towards those outrages and to extend to him appropriately the mercy we had shown to other bishops, even though they are found not to have had the same responsibility for the judgment. But he has greatly surpassed his first crimes with the latter ones. What was his crime? And had the presumption to pronounce excommunication against the most holy and sacred Leo, Archbishop of Great Rome. There have also been presented to the Holy and Great Council plaints of accusers full of various charges, and although summoned a third time with a canonical admonition by our most devout brothers and fellow bishops, he spurned coming, held back by secret pangs of conscience. So what are they saying? They're saying there are multiple reasons why sentence is being passed on him. The greatest of which is he had the presumption to pronounce an excommunication against Pope Leo the Great, who is the Bishop of Rome. You can't do that. You can't judge the first see. This principle that no one judges the first see, no one judges the Pope, no one judges his magisterium. That principle is ancient, and it's found all throughout church history.
Yeah, it's ancient. It's so ancient that it's
seeing it here at Chalcedon.
What?
I'm sorry. I just say so ancient that it postdates Chalcedon. Like what? What? It comes from the Samakian forgeries.
You don't judge the first see. You don't pronounce excommunications against Rome, or judge his magisterium, or anathematize him, or declare him a heretic, or accuse him of heresy. You don't get to do any of that. The only one who can judge the first see is the first see. So a sitting pope can judge a deceased pope. A reigning pope can judge a predecessor pope. But that's it. Nobody else gets to judge him. And they even note this. Therefore, now, if there are Eastern Orthodox watching, I want you to pay attention to this, because this is where you often drop the ball. You'll say, no, Jesus is head of the church, not the Pope. Well, wait, you don't read your own councils. Therefore, the Holy and Most Blessed Pope, the head of the Universal Church. Yeah, you just read that correctly. And this isn't the only ecumenical council that says this about the Pope. Multiple ecumenical councils say this about the Pope. Ephesus, Chalcedon, Nicaea too. As an Orthodox, you need to read your own councils before attempting to critique the Catholic position, because what you do is you come with bad Protestant arguments that you use against Catholicism, and then you don't realize those arguments are overturned by your own councils. The Most Holy and Blessed Pope, the head of the Universal Church. Did the bishop stand up and say, no, no? Actually, no. They all agreed with the papal legates. Not one of them said, oh, this is heresy. No, they all went along with this. The Pope, the head of the Universal Church, through us, his representatives, and with the assent of the Holy Council, endowed as he is with the dignity of Peter the Apostle, who is called the foundation of the church, the rock of faith. So Peter is the rock. Pay attention, Protestants, who want to say, oh, Peter's not the rock. Oh, the church fathers don't teach that. You have an entire ecumenical council that says this. And the doorkeeper of the heavenly kingdom has stripped him of episcopal dignity, excluded him from all priestly functions. What remains is for the venerable council assembled to pronounce, as justice bids, a canonical verdict against aforesaid Dioscorus. What does it say? It's saying this. Rome has already stripped him of his episcopal dignity. He's already done. He no longer has authority. Before Chalcedon, the Pope has unilaterally already deposed the Patriarch of Constantinople. And people say the Pope didn't have universal jurisdiction. Here's an example of it. He has already stripped him of episcopal dignity. Why? Because he attempted to excommunicate the Pope. The Pope says, I'm not having this. He's stripped of all priestly functions. That's called universal jurisdiction. Moreover, what they're saying is, now you bishops assembled here, you need to share in this judgment. You need to join in this judgment and show that you're on the right side. And so what's left now is for you to do the same, and for you to issue a canonical verdict as an imperial council, which they did. And if you look at the following part, right after the legates speak, you can see their response. Anatolius, who was, by the way, kind of team Dioscorus at one point. Here's Anatolius, the Patriarch of Constantinople, who completely bows down to Rome, by the way.
He was originally on Team Saint Dioscorus because he was actually from Alexandria, and he recognized that Saint Dioscorus was teaching the same faith as Saint Cyril, which is why he never condemned him for heresy. He says this. Um, Let me find the exact line. I think in session 4, session 4, I think lines 26 through 27. He basically says Dioscorus was not deposed for heresy. But if you look at the later councils of the Chalcedonians, for example, not the Second Council of Constantinople, that one was it tried to hide its real motives. But the Third Council of Constantinople and Nicaea too were very, very clear that St. Dioscorus is a heretic, contrary to what Anatolius says. The reason why Anatolius switched sides is because he basically told Pope Leo, "Oh, accept what the First Council of Constantinople decreed, which is basically that the See of Constantinople would be above the See of Alexandria." He told him, "Accept this, and I'm basically on your side on everything you say." And we have the letters showing this idea.
Right. So Anatolius and Maximus, they like to point out they were Dioscorus guys. They were Dioscorus guys. So you like Chalcedonians have a problem because of them. So you need to now figure out why these guys are the canonical holders of those sees. Who put them there? Dioscorus and Ephesus 2 put them there. So then Dioscorus and Ephesus 2 were valid to put them there. Or else, if you whatever you want to say about how these guys got their positions, if you don't want to recognize Ephesus 2 and Dioscorus authority and putting those guys in those sees, even if they became Chalcedonian, you need to remove them because the way they got the sees, according to you, is uncanonical. That's the rule of the church. Otherwise, Ephesus 2 was valid.
Yes, but there's even more to it. And that more to it is that in the Second Council of Constantinople, they explicitly say that Chalcedon accepted the deposition of Domnus that happened at Ephesus 2. But hold on. Domnus was condemned in absentia. So there goes the whole argument that these depositions are not valid or whatever because many of them were done in absentia. Well, guess what? Now you have a so-called ecumenical council which disagrees with you there. So this is just a problem on top of problem.
You okay, I can?
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Okay.
Right after the council, it's kind of interesting to see how much Constantinople bended the knee to Rome when you read his letters to the Pope and the Emperor. It's kind of comical. Anatolius, who was again Team Dioscorus at one point, of Imperial Constantinople, New Rome, said, "I concur completely with the Apostolic See." Did he say, "Oh no, you're a heretic"? No. We can judge the Holy See. "Oh, you're a heretic for saying that Rome is the head of the universal church." No, he isn't. There's only local churches. There's no universal church. I've actually heard that from some people. Or, "Oh, there's a universal church, but Jesus is its head." I hear that constantly. Well, your own council say otherwise, and your own bishops say otherwise. "I concur completely with the Apostolic See. I too ratify the deposition of Dioscorus, formerly bishop of the great city of Alexandria, who has deprived himself of all priestly ministry by his complete disregard for the canons of the Holy Fathers and refusing to comply when canonically summoned a third time." They all concur with this. They all say the same thing. You can read through it, every single one of them. Julian, bishop of Kos, legate of the Church of Rome, metropolitan bishop of Corinth, Peter, Theodore, metropolitan bishop of Tarsus. They all concur with what the legates say, and they follow in the judgment. He's stripped of episcopal dignity. And they concur with the reasons. I concur with all the verdicts that the very great and God-beloved council has issued concerning him. Well, what is that verdict? That he's to be deposed and stripped. Why? Well, you just saw. For multiple reasons. Yes, he refused to come to the council after being summoned 3 times. That's one of the reasons. There's a half-truth to that. But it's a both and. It's also because he attempted to judge Rome and anathematize Rome, and you can't do that. It's all the above. It's a both and, not an either or. And the Council Fathers recognize that. Later on, at the Eighth Ecumenical Council, 869, 870, I'll read from its acts from the 7th session that harkens back to what happened with Chalcedon, harkens back to what happened with Dioscorus. And do they say, oh, well, he was just simply deposed for not coming after being summoned 3 times? Is that what they say? Is that what is in the memory of this council? Actually, no. What's actually in the forefront of their memory of Dioscorus, by the time you get to 870 and 869 with the Eighth Ecumenical Council, Constantinople IV, by that time, their memory of Dioscorus of Alexandria still is he attempted to judge the Holy See. Now, you have Photius, the Patriarch of Constantinople, who eventually died in communion with Rome. So he went back into communion with a papal supremacist pope and a filioquist pope, a pope who believed in papal supremacy and the filioque. Yes, yes, Photius died in communion with a papist and a filioquist. Facts don't care about your feelings, as they say. I know some people aren't happy about that, but it's the truth. Okay, well, when Photius attempted to rashly judge the Holy See in 867, just like Dioscorus had done, he had attempted to excommunicate the Pope and rashly judged him. A council is called, 869, just 2 years later, to deal with this situation. The emperor and the Pope need to deal with the fact that the Patriarch of Constantinople rashly judged the Holy See. Well, it's curious because in this council, papal supremacy is taught very clearly. And they just accepted it.
I don't know if the Photius stuff is that skippable or is that mixed in with our stuff too?
I mean, I just don't find it.
Done anyway. Go ahead. Don't worry about it.
Oh, also, can you pin the comment by Superboy Prime Solos, the most recent one by him?
Do we have evidence?
Yeah, can you put up the screen real quick? I just want to respond to his comment real quick.
Yeah. This one?
By the way.
Which one? This one?
Or yeah. Okay, so Superboy Prime Solos, he asked the question. Oh, no, the other one.
Okay.
The one before it.
We should definitely have a call for questions, just in case people have.
Yeah, but I just want to address this one real quick because I think it will show the early church view on the papacy real quick, since this whole section has been about the papacy. So Superboy Prime Solos asked, do they have evidence that the Bishop of Rome cannot be judged before 451 AD? I wanted to add a quote from Pope Liberius of Rome. Let me see if I can actually get it pulled up on my screen.
Oh yeah. Which canon allows for us?
In the meantime, I just want to say this from Mina Solomon's comment. You're absolutely right, Mina. I agree with Eric also. I think a lot of the Catholics are thinking that way now. With the Eastern Orthodox, they really actually do have to deal with Lofton's video. They have to deal with it substantially and try to figure out how they can reconcile accepting Chalcedon and the tome and not accepting papal supremacy, not just Chalcedon and the tome, but everything that it sets up for later, like the Libellus of Armistice and whatever else.
To use the classic Michael Lofton argument, which is a good argument, is that Agatho's letter to the emperor was accepted as divinely written at the Third Council of Constantinople, and they used Petrine language for it. And that one is very clearly papal indefectibilist.
Yep.
And the first the first attack on a non-Chalcedonian group, which appeals to Roman infallibility, comes from John IV of Jerusalem's letter to the Catholicos Abbas of Caucasian Albania. And that was written towards the end of the 6th century. So the fact that you even have their Patriarchate of Jerusalem, as they call it, defending this idea, and using it as an apologetical method says a lot. And there's, of course, a lot to be said about Maximus of Constantinople as well. But something reminds me about what Mina Solomon said, is that the Roman Catholic apologists will try to use Philip the Legate at the Council of Ephesus in order to prove the papalist stuff. And one of the things on our agenda was to cover that. I know that ICANN has some stuff about that, so I just wanted to...
Can you guys see my screen? I'm trying to show my screen, but it's not coming up for some reason. Okay, there we go. Okay, so in response to Superboy Prime Solos' question, Pope Liberius wrote, and this is recorded by Saint Athanasius in the History of the Arians. He says, "How is it possible for me to do this against Athanasius? How can we condemn a man whom not one council only, but a second assembled from all parts of the world has fairly acquitted, and whom the Church of the Romans dismissed in peace? Who will approve of our conduct if we reject in his absence one whose presence among us we gladly welcomed and admitted to our communion? There is no ecclesiastical canon, nor have we transmitted to us such tradition from the fathers, who in their turn received from the great and blessed Apostle Peter." Okay, so there's several things I want to point out in this one simple quote. First off, he doesn't see it as possible for him to do anything against Athanasius because a council has fairly acquitted him. A second one assembled by the entire world has acquitted him. And he says that even his church has admitted what these councils say. And next he says, "Who will approve of our conduct if we reject in his absence, whose presence among us we gladly welcomed and admitted him to our communion?" So he doesn't say there's no way for us to do this. He says we can, but who will approve of our conduct? A Roman Catholic nowadays, they would say, no, he can't do that. He cannot. He can't do this, or he cannot make an error. But here he's admitting that he can make the error, but who will approve of it? No one's going to approve. Why is that? Because no ecclesiastical canon allows it, and no tradition of the fathers allows it. Not because he has some special papal power. No, because no tradition nor canon allows it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Daniel Mikowski's comment here about the congratulatory letter from Leo to Dioscorus when he became Pope of Alexandria. Also, there was a letter of Leo to Dioscorus about when and when not to ordain priests and things like that. Like he's already trying to control from the very beginning. Leo.
Yes, he letter 6 of Leo, right?
Yeah, he already had these ambitions, and he was a very aggressive pope. Like before him, you don't see a bishop of Rome involving in the little things of the other patriarchates. It's weird.
It's actually a weird micromanagement, really, that we see in the modern day
I don't even think
system of unions.
I don't even think Dioscorus replied to him. I think he just left him on red, like he did with the tome.
Yeah. Or at least there's not an extant letter.
Right.
But I feel like such a letter would be preserved. So I think it's pretty safe to say that there wasn't a reply, nor would you really expect there to be, because the same rational response to such a odd, obviously power-hungry individual is just like ignore the fella.
Right.
Okay. Can you put my screen back up?
Yeah.
Okay.
You good?
Yep.
And Photius effectively accepts the papal claims and dies in communion with the papist. But they're judging Photius here in one of its sessions, and they're saying what he did is not okay. You can't attempt to rashly judge, or judge at all, the first see. You know why? Because you're the second see. You're Constantinople. You're below. You're not number one. You're below. You're number two. You as number two don't get to judge number one. And they say, after a whole litany of condemnations and examples for why this is condemnatory behavior on part of Photius, they say, then the fourth great and ecumenical council so detested such effrontery that it condemned Dioscorus of Alexandria for failing to come to a thrice summons. No, without the possibility of reinstatement, for he had the temerity and contravention of the privileges of the first see and of the rule already mentioned, to put himself before his superior, even though he was inferior, and without recognizing the order laid down by God. So this is not an order merely from the way the cities were at the time of the Roman Empire. It's not merely that first is Rome because it just has a lot of martyrs, has a lot of great guys who died there. Peter and Paul just simply died there. Some cool saints died there. It's the seat of old Rome. No, it's more than that. The order is laid down by God. And it says, without recognizing the order laid down by God, to pass a rash judgment against the bishop of a superior see, namely Pope Leo. So Dioscorus is cited as precedent to condemn or of condemnatory behavior. And they map that onto what Photius is doing. And they're saying, hey, this isn't okay. Dioscorus was condemned for this very thing. I mentioned this in a video the other day, and again, somebody just Eastern Orthodox in the comment section jumped in. This is misleading. This is disingenuous. He was condemned for failing to come to thrice summons. It's a both and. We're not Protestants. It's a both and, not an either or. It's that and he refused. He condemned the Pope and then also refused to come to a thrice summons. It's a both and. So it's not misleading. It's not disingenuous. It's just another instance where Eastern Orthodox don't know their own history. And many Catholics don't know their own history either. You know why I say that? Because Catholics right now are repeating the same mistake, the mistake of Photius and the mistake of Dioscorus, among others. Bishops right now are making the same mistake. Bishops who are condemning the papacy of teaching heresy. That's taking place right now. Good guys who speak about Jesus all the time, sitting in judgment of
I don't know.
the
I don't know
first
what happened. I can't. Trying to get
and when
oops. Sorry,
Okay.
I didn't hear you.
No, it's okay. So there's this comment. I want to address it. Okay. Rome has all the liturgical rites. It's truly Catholic. Oh, you are two separate local communities and are universal. All yours go. Okay. All right. Let's dissect this real quick. This is going to be very easy. Does Rome really have all the rites? They don't. They have very, very, very watered down Latin parodies, Romanized, Westernized parodies of the Eastern rites. They don't really have the Eastern rites. They don't have the Syriac rite, whether it's Western or Eastern. They don't have it. They don't have the Coptic rite or the Armenian rite or the Ge'ez rite. They don't have them. Even the Greek rite is watered down. I know Lofton is a Melkite Catholic, Byzantine Catholic, whatever they call, but even them compared to the Eastern Chalcedonians, not in communion with Rome, it's not the same. What does what rite does Oriental Orthodoxy not have? The Greek and the Latin? Yeah, because those are the churches that schismed. But what we have all the rites in their pure native forms. So Joseph Jude, you have two first names, dude. Go ahead.
Are you finished, Daniel?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I also wanted to add that the Roman Church doesn't even have the Latin Rite, or at least I think they don't at least have the Apostolic Latin Rite. Most of their traditional Latin liturgical stuff comes from Pope Gregory, who was basically 2 centuries or 1 century after the schism. He's like the big name for all their liturgical rites and stuff. And on top of that, now they're even getting rid of the traditional Latin Rite. Now it's just becoming this Vatican II washed down Protestant Mass, which is it has nothing to do with the Latin Rite. Now the priest looks toward the people as if he's worshiping towards them. They have basically Protestant instruments. It's nothing like the traditional Latin Rite that they claim. And the Greeks as well. I mean, the Greeks, their rite has developed a lot. I know that they've also basically suppressed all other rites and basically maybe I don't know if they combined them or if they just mass produced the Constantinople rite. But even then, I mean, the rite of Constantinople isn't even apostolic either. I mean, Constantinople only became a church around the 4th century, or at least like a major church.
Right.
And so there's nothing very ancient about it. And they say that I think they say Saint Bartholomew, or who was it? They claim went to Constantinople.
Oh, they claim Bartholomew and Saint Andrew.
Oh yeah, Saint Andrew. They claim that he went to Constantinople, which was back then called Byzantium. No, this is not true. If you look at the history of Eusebius, or at any history from early on, or at least before the schism, maybe even after the schism for a long time, they all mention where
Yeah,
where Saint
that
Andrew
comes from
went,
the
and
time
not
of Agassiz, doesn't it? Like
yeah
of Agassiz from Rome.
they talk about where Saint Andrew went, and none of them mention Byzantium. He never went to Byzantium. So the Greeks don't even have an apostolic church. The Latins are losing theirs if they even had it in the first place. As I mentioned, they everything they have nowadays is from Pope Gregory, who was a century after Chalcedon, or 2 centuries. I can't remember exactly. And so they don't have the ancient stuff of Egypt or Syria or etc. And they don't have the ancient stuff of Rome or Constantinople. So what do they have? They just have a very loose union between Rome and these so-called Eastern Catholic churches, which are very washed down from what they actually should be, from the ideal for
Right.
them. Yeah,
And even the Greek rite, though, like the mainstream Byzantine rite, that, as you rightly pointed out, ICANN, has, its own innovations. One of the very important and dangerous ones historically, if we don't want to decontextualize the history, is the Trisagion. Viewing the Trisagion as a Trinitarian hymn and not a Christological hymn is completely contrary to the church tradition throughout the world. I'm not just speaking about Saint Radula using the Christological portion of the Trisagion pre-schism, but even in the Latin West, the Trisagion used to be Christological. Now I don't think they even have the Trisagion, actually, in the
So
Latin West.
I want to comment on Mina's point here. He says there's an Egyptian saying. We have the same saying. My dad's Jordanian, my mom's Iraqi. We have it in all. I think it's a Middle Eastern saying altogether. ناخذ على قد عقله, right? So he get like they just say stuff to each other to get stuff by, like they just kind of appease each other, to kind of it's even disrespectful, like it's belittling one to the other. So Anatolius did it to Leo here, but Leo did it to everybody too. Like they did it to Anatolius. So when they said something at Chalcedon in the early sessions about where Ephesus sat Flavian, and then the Roman legates replied and said, "Yeah, we have him seated at number 1 or number 2, wherever he was. Like, oh, look at us, we have him ranked higher. Like, يأخذهم على قد عقلهم, you know." And then we have Grant also saying Rome has all the liturgical rites, forces Latin on everybody. Yeah. Okay. Anything else before we keep going?
yeah. I just wanted to show one more thing because Thomas was talking about the Trisagion.
Mm-hmm.
Let me present my screen one last time.
Sure, no problem.
Here we go. All right, can you pin my screen?
It's on there.
Okay, so this is an article by Father Peter Farrington of the Coptic Church. I will be honest, I don't always agree with what he says on some other topics, but he has a very, very nice article on the Trisagion and its history. First off, we know that Trisagion was always Christological in Antioch. For example, Saint Trabula of Edessa, he lived during the Ephesian controversy, not during the Chalcedonian controversy. He died before that. So he's pre-schism. He uses a Christological Trisagion. And for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about here, that there's basically this debate about the Trisagion, which is Holy God, Holy Mighty, Holy Immortal, who was crucified for us, have mercy on us. This is the view of the Orthodox Church. We refer to Christ, the Holy God, the Holy Mighty, and the Holy Immortal, who was crucified for us. Now, for the Chalcedonians, they view the Trisagion as Holy Mighty, Holy God, Holy Mighty, Holy Immortal, and they stop there. Have mercy on us. They stop there. They view it as directed towards the Trinity. They say the Holy God is the Father, the Holy Mighty is the Son, and the Holy Immortal is the Holy Spirit. Uh, First off, I mean, this isn't even theologically consistent. Like, why why is uh why is the Holy Spirit referred to as the Holy Immortal instead of being the Holy Mighty or the Holy God? I mean, the Holy Spirit, everyone knew he was immortal, even the heretics who denied it, who denied his personhood or his divinity. So why is this the term being specifically used for him? Shouldn't he be referred to as the Holy Mighty? No, because they say that this phrase was they say that this was basically used as a defense for every person of the Trinity. The Holy Mighty being the Son, so no one denies his mightiness. The Holy God being the Father, because everyone knows he's God, and then the Holy Immortal being for the Holy Spirit. I just don't get the point of this phrase being for the
It clearly
Trinity.
comes from Saint Proclus of Constantinople. But the problem with that is that Saint Proclus reigned in they claim it was a divine basically revelation that was during the reign of Saint Proclus. The problem with that is that Saint Proclus' reign started in the same year that Saint Rabula departed in the Lord. Okay, and moreover, this hagiography of it happening in the time of Saint Proclus, it comes from the Nestorian monks of the sleepless monks of Constantinople. And if you actually look at the letter, I forget what the guy's name is called. It starts with I think it starts with a G. But if you read that letter, he's like denying throughout the letter that he relates this miracle that happens in the time of Saint Proclus. He's denying that God the Word suffered. It's real that God suffered. It's really, really bad. It's like this extreme Nestorianism that got those monks condemned by John II of Rome or John III of Rome or something like that. So the origin of their whole story, their hagiographical tradition, and all of that, it's just straight Nestorianism, and it really cuts to the chase of what their belief system is and leads to, and just the fact that, hey, at the end of the day, the Council of Ephesus was completely right when it condemns all Diophysites, those who say that the parts remain two of their own category after the union, condemns all of them as denying a true incarnation. And Saint John the Apostle, the evangelist, actually calls such people Antichrist. There's a very real reason for that. And yeah.
Okay. So the point I wanted to make is that first off, we know that it was universal in Antioch that the Trisagion was used. We know from Saint Rabula. Here we know from the Chalcedonian Patriarch Caladion, who had the seal of Antioch. He uses it as Christological. Ephraim of Amida, he is actually venerated by the Chalcedonians. Once again, he uses it as Christological. And what's more is that even the West used it as Christological. See here, the Chalcedonian West accepted it as a Christological hymn. Bishop Avitus of Vienne, modern Lyons in France, he wrote to the Burgundian king in 512. Look here, Christological Trisagion, who was crucified for us. Again, Bishop Mamertus, yeah. Once again, Christological Trisagion, who takes away the sin of the world, have mercy on us. Yeah, and again, the Diocese of Autun, once again, Christological, until it was suppressed by the Carolingians or whatever in the modification of the Mass. And so there were many alterations to the liturgy and changes in the West and in the Constantinople to avoid the tradition of the Orthodox. And one thing that Daniel M. brought up in the comments is that Isaiah 9:6 has all the titles in the Trisagion being applied to Christ. He is called Mighty God, Everlasting Father. So Mighty God, Mighty, Holy Mighty, God, Holy God, Everlasting, Holy Immortal. And that's all I had to say. So I'll go back to sharing my original screen. Oh yeah, and the reason it's such a big deal is that they condemned us for the Christological Trisagion, even though their own saints accepted it, and it was historically the historic Trisagion. But
There's just
time
one
to move
small
on.
thing I want to add. With Calandion, the parallel Antiochian patriarchate, he was an historian. He actually altered the Christological Trisagion to say, "Holy God, holy mighty, holy immortal, Christ the King, who was crucified for us, have mercy upon us." And so he accepts the Christological idea of it, but he seems to make it so that Christ is somehow different from the holy God, holy mighty. It's worded in such a way so as to allow for a possible Nestorianizing sort of thing.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. The Nestorians, their basic tactic was denying that God died for us, denying that, yeah, well, some of them later accepted it, but historically they've denied that it was God the Word who died for us. And instead they would say, God the Word who is Christ died for us. The reason is because they viewed the name Christ as a common name for the two natures, a name shared by the two natures. And so Christ can die, but not God the Word. But Christ is God the Word, and so it just became a mess. But yeah, so that's why it would be an Nestorian addition to add that it was specifically Christ as opposed to just leaving it as Holy God, Holy Mighty, Holy Immortal as it originally was.
Dioscorus did this, and when Photius did this, they were anathematized, both of them. They were condemned by the Holy Fathers because nobody judges the first see. The first see alone can judge the first see. That's what you see with the Sixth Ecumenical Council. Pope Leo II judged his predecessor Honorius in conjunction with his brother bishops at that council. He ratified the council. But aside from a sitting pope judging a predecessor pope, nobody gets to do that. And that includes you and I. We might disagree with some of the private opinions and private comments of a bishop of Rome. We might disagree with some of those things. We might even express some of our concerns about some of the things that the Pope has actually taught. You can express concerns. But to sit in judgment of his magisterium and say, this is heresy, the Pope is teaching heresy, you don't get to do that. Because even the Patriarch of Constantinople didn't get to do that. Even the Patriarch of Alexandria didn't get to do that. They were condemned and anathematized for it. And if they're condemned and anathematized for this, how much more are you and I, as mere laymen, who in our YouTube proprios, we get on YouTube and start anathematizing the Pope, or get on Twitter and start tweeting anathemas against the Pope. He's a heretic. We're just as condemned as Photius and Dioscorus when they did this.
So again, Dioscorus did not anathematize the Pope of Rome. Leo excommunicated Dioscorus. Dioscorus did not anathematize the tome or Leo for 2 years. In 451, Dioscorus excommunicated Leo back for excommunicating him first. Michael, you have a big head. Please understand this. Go ahead.
It's condemnatory behavior. Our forefathers would not have stood for it. It's worthy of an anathema. And so for any bishop who is out there, any priest, any layman who is out there judging the first see, this needs to be a lesson that we learn from. Let us not just simply say, oh, you Eastern Orthodox need to know your own stuff. Yes, they do. And yeah, they don't. Yes, they need to learn their own stuff, but so do we as Catholics, because we're repeating the same mistakes that they made. The East slowly and surely broke off from communion with Rome for this very behavior, for condemning the Pope and sitting in judgment of his magisterium. And that is why we have Eastern Orthodoxy today. Well, we as Catholics are repeating that same mistake today, even bishops. And it's uncalled for, and it needs to be addressed. It needs to be called out. And we need to learn from our history before we continue to repeat history and introduce more schisms into the Catholic Church. Because believe it or not, that's actually already happening. We're already seeing the emergence of a new schism of people who are judging the first see right now. Hopefully this is helpful. Again, hopefully we'll learn from this. If you felt this was helpful, and you feel people need to see this video, I need you to hit the like button, comment, and especially subscribe. When you do those things, YouTube's algorithm kicks in and it will share this with more people. So if you know that people are being misled right now, and people are anathematizing the Pope and rashly sitting in judgment of the Holy See, and they're not in accord with the Catholic tradition on this matter, and you want them to be reached with some pushback, some opposition, and some guidance, please do your part by hitting that subscribe button, like, and comment so that YouTube will share this with others and it will reach those people. Also, if you want to support me, patreon.com/reason and theology is a great place where you can do it. If you join my Patreon, you'll get access to plenty of extra content and you'll be supporting me. Also, I'm going to put a link in the show notes to my GoFundMe and my PayPal if you would just rather use those platforms instead. Okay, well, I hope you all.
Yeah, fellas.
Take him off the thing.
Yeah.
Stop sharing.
Yeah, him and his 33-pound head. Okay. So listen. Dioscorus, you guys want to say something before I'll go last, because I want to answer Grant's point. And then we'll take questions.
Okay, it looks like to me something that Mina Solomon said, that he said he's talking about Bishop Strickland et al. By the way, yeah, I think the whole purpose of this stream by Michael was just to make basically a video against people condemning the Pope, specifically because of the recent controversy in the Roman Catholic Church between the Pope and Bishop Strickland, or Strickland, however it's pronounced. I just want to add this. I kind of view this as an evil act, because he wanted to use St. Dioscorus as evidence against this, and he decided to do this on the day of St. Dioscorus' feast day. So he's basically taking a man who was just on this day being commemorated by us and using him as basically just an example against for his own political motives, or his own his own agenda against the attackers of the Pope. Very evil and dishonest, in my opinion.
Yeah, the saints of God won't be mocked forever because there's a day of judgment. But respectfully to Mr. Lofton, and really to various shades of Chalcedonian, what you should be focused on isn't St. Dioscorus excommunicating Leo and all of this stuff, or the later anathematization of Leo by certain persons, or by some other Roman Pope being anathematized by whosoever or whatsoever. Take it back to really the beginning, which is the Council of Ephesus. Why does the Council of Ephesus anathematize Leo of Rome and all of the Diophysites? Why do you hold to a council which anathematizes you? And of course, the response will be, well, come on, that's not our position that it anathematizes us. Well, that's fine, but no one really cares, because at the end of the day, the homilies of St. Theodotus of Ancyra are so perspicuous that you can't even pretend to argue this. I think Frankel, who did the translation of his homilies in the study of Patristica, he talks about, this monophysitism displayed by St. Theodotus' homilies. And so this is something that scholarship accepts. It's something that our fathers have been quoting from for millennia. I remember post-Chalcedon, St. Timothy II to cite them, but they were cited even before Chalcedon to refute Nestorians. So
I can.
I already said what I had to say.
Okay. All right, let's do it. So Grant's question here: does he think we're Eastern Orthodox, or is he feigning ignorance for the sake of the video? Okay. So here's what I kind of want to conclude with, and then we'll take questions and we'll go. So what he's doing, the honest truth, Grant, is that Lofton didn't make the video with us in mind. He doesn't care about us. Like, we're not on his radar. We don't have that big of an online media presence for him to think about us or to make a video addressing it to us. He probably it didn't occur to him that there might be like some kind of backlash about this. he's making the video with the Eastern Orthodox and the traditional Catholics in mind. Maybe a minor thing being Protestants, but mainly those two groups in mind. And he's trying to say, look, guys, you can't judge the Pope. Photius, you should have learned from Dioscorus. Traditional Catholics, stop calling Francis a heretic. That's his channel's based on that. He's alienated all the traditional Catholics, the TLM, all that stuff. So he's not that's his thing. That's his fight, his mission. He never had an like maybe back when he was EO, he used to talk crap about us, but since then he's not thinking about us. The thing for us is, if you want to set examples for EO, you want to do apologetics for EO, do whatever you want to do, but keep our name out of your mouth. Don't use us as an example. Okay, we're gonna do this back to you. Don't talk about us. Okay, so you guys want to add anything, or are we gonna take questions? I'm gonna go through the comments right now.
Yeah, I think we should take questions.
Okay, I can.
Sure.
Okay.
So we could take statements as well as questions. It doesn't have to be a question. It can be some insight someone provides, and we can maybe give our thoughts on it if it's worth.
Daniel M. You see his video on defending Catholics sainting the Libyan martyrs, despicable, stealing the blood of the martyrs. Martyrs, their Chalcedonian ancestors created as well. I mean, yeah, it's a joke. It's a big time joke. I think the kids call it coping. You can't just pretend that the martyrs were Catholic because you feel like it. You're trying to reconcile your ecclesiology. Well, they were Catholic because they couldn't have known anything else, so the church just judged it. It doesn't work like that. Everybody with a brain knows that they're Orthodox. Okay, so it's not you guys. This is what does Salib say? Muhammadan tier apologetics, stuff like that. So this is who are your this is this is what it is. Like, you can't who are you kidding? Isn't it a joke? Like, be serious. We're adults. We're mature adults with brains.
I'm sorry. What was the original question, though? I didn't.
So the question is the martyrs that ISIS killed on the Libyan beach.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's the question. We don't have any other questions that I see. It's the only one. No questions, huh?
What about statements? Does anyone, if anyone wants to provide
Yeah, there's statements here.
It doesn't have to be questions. It can be statements.
So Mina agreed with what I said about him trying to refute us. I mean, refute the EOs and the traditional Catholics, not us. G Copt is saying, please make one of these videos regularly. We need more OO content on this platform. Thank you, Subdeacon. Thank you.
Yeah, wait, shout out. Let's shout out. Should we shout out the new channel that
Yeah. What's it
called? So everyone, there's a new channel.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Fanatic Coptic. All right. You see the last three letters of each of those words are the same. Fanatic Coptic. Okay. It's not just Coptic Orthodox. It's an Oriental Orthodox channel that someone recently made, and it has an introductory video right now. And I suspect that we can plan to see some more videos after that introductory video. So God willing, in good time. But check that channel out, and just keep it on your radar. Probably subscribe to that one because it looks like it's gonna have really good content. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mina Solomon, the comment about the new book, The Last Pharaoh by Dr. Volker Menzi. Yeah, it's a very good book. A very good book in defense of St. Dioscorus. He refutes a lot of the objections made against him in the Council of Chalcedon. The one thing I don't like about it is it kind of attacks Saint Cyril kind of a little bit, but for the most part, it's a pretty good book.
Yeah, about the bribery, so-called. Yeah, but that, and also Saint Athanasius.
Yeah. Do you guys want me to present? Do you guys want me to present my screen about Fanatic Coptic, the YouTube channel?
Go for it.
All
Yeah.
right. Share screen. Here we go. So here's the channel. It's not any one of us. It's someone new, but it's a very good channel, and he has an introduction video up. Oh, Daniel, can you pin my? Wait, is it pinned? Oh yeah, it is. My bad. Yeah, so he has an introduction video put up for the Oriental Orthodox Church, and also, yeah, just good stuff. Yeah,
Okay.
I know the guy who owns it. He's a very good guy.
So Mina Solomon is mentioning the book The Last Pharaoh, Oxford University Press, I think it is. It's a good book about Saint Dioscorus. Check it out too. Very good book.
Yeah. Grant Hillman says the papists try to claim Saint Gregory of Narek as their own too. It's infuriating, but also really funny. It is really funny, and it's important to note that Saint Gregory's teacher, Saint Ananias, he wrote something called The Root of Faith, and it's a refutation of Diophysite Christology. So, of course, St. Gregory of Narek wasn't part of them. Like, sure, never mind the fact that they weren't in communion with Rome. But his own teacher, who was, part of the Narek monastery, wrote that refutation of Diophysite Christology. And also St. Gregory of Narek himself displays a Miaphysite, very unitive Christology. That's that of Saint.
And by the way, Ananias of Narek.
Scholarship I've seen attack Saint Gregory the Illuminator as the source of the Armenians falling into Monophysite heresy.
Yeah, and Dioscorus, by the way, Saint Ananias of Narek, he's not only the teacher of Saint Gregory, but he's also his uncle, so a relative as well. So, I mean, if they went against each other, it would be kind of awkward, especially since they were in the same monastery. Relatives. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So do we have a source for this other than Babai, or does the last pharaoh cover this?
For what?
The uncle thing.
No, I'm talking about Saint Gregory of Narek.
Oh, Saint Gregory of Narek says it. I didn't know that.
No. I'm saying that Saint Ananias was the uncle of Saint Gregory of Narek, not just his teacher.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah. So a relative as well.
Saint Dioscorus being related to Saint Cyril.
No.
So we have two questions. Mina. So we'll do Mina's first. Do Coptic Catholics have Dioscorus and Severus in their calendar of saints? I think so. I think I've heard that.
No, they don't.
It's one of the OO uniates do. I think maybe it's the Malankara or
Syriac. I think it's Syriac Catholics or something.
I don't know. Jacob Saruj, yes. Even the Roman Catholics have Jacob of Saruj. It's weird.
Oh yeah. So the thing about Saint Jacob of Saruj is that so originally the Melkites of like probably a millennia ago venerated Saint Jacob of Saruj in like their monasteries or whatever. Basically, they had some ecumenistic tendencies with their venerations back in the day, and so because of this, Saint Jacob of Saruj got into their thing. Now, more recently with the Roman Catholics, even like I want to say, way before the Vatican II era, they had been venerating Saint Jacob of Saruj, and they tried to posit that he was a Chalcedonian, or at least kind of sort of Chalcedonian. That is so indefensible nowadays that it's like, it's not even funny. It's like the Isaac of Nineveh thing. Like the fact that he was an historian it's not even like a question anymore because of the mountain of proof, independent proofs.
All right. Anything else, you guys? That's it? Okay, look out.
Yeah.
Okay. Look out, you guys, for a show coming up. Me and Salib and I can, and hopefully Dioscorus will be with us, to talk about Mariology and Chalcedonian Christology. That should be very soon, within not later than a week or so. I honestly would do it tonight or tomorrow, if the next day, if they're going to be available. So we'll figure it out on their schedules, and then we'll put it out there. Probably a lot of my stuff is going to be spontaneous like this, because we're Middle Eastern, and that's just how we do it. Anyone, all Orthodox, pray for me. I'm praying for you. Okay. Take care, everybody. God bless. Bye.
God bless.